Okay, we are now live on YouTube. Hello and welcome to McDougall's Medicine with Dr. John and Mary McDougall. I'm their daughter Heather and the CEO of the McDougall Program. Let's see, this hour is yours. We are going to be answering questions that you have. We're going to start out with diabetes and then move into general questions. I'll get through as many questions as I can, but there's quite a few. But know that we'll be back next Sunday and every Sunday after that at 5 p.m. Pacific. So please type your questions in the chat box, or you can email them to office@drmcdougall.com. Now, a little plug for the McDougall Program. The only sponsor for this hour is our 12-day online course where people all over the world join us to get educated on how to live a healthy lifestyle, get off their medications, and regain their lost health and appearance. To find out more, you can visit our website, which is www.drmcdougall.com. Okay, let's get started. Hello, Mom and Dad, Dr. McDougall, Mary. Great to see you both. How are you?
We've been waiting all week to get together with you guys. We're going to make this a really fun, fast hour. 5 o'clock every Sunday Pacific time.
It usually is.
Well, it goes fast.
Very
for
fast.
us. Yeah,
yeah.
we don't want to go too slow with them. I gave you a homework assignment that was to look at the 1-hour lecture on diabetes. And though, if you had time to do it, fine. If you had an interest, fine. But maybe after we talk about diabetes a little bit, you'll want to take the trouble to watch this YouTube video that I put together about diabetes and how I treat diabetes. Diabetes, the word diabetes means siphon or output or a large amount of urine. That's what it means.
Really?
Yeah. It doesn't mean diabetes mellitus. It doesn't mean you have blood sugar problems. Diabetes is a Greek word that means that you put out an awful lot of urine. I mean, they can imagine people of old. They just noticed that as people got sicker and sicker and sicker, they urinated all the time, large quantities. Yeah.
I had no idea.
And then what they did is they tasted the urine.
Oh.
And diabetes mellitus, the mellitus part means it was sweet.
Okay.
Sweet urine. And there's something called diabetes insipidus, which is a pituitary problem where you can't hold on to your water. And so it's diabetes insipidus. So diabetes mellitus really means you put out a lot of water. The diabetes part is urinate a lot.
Okay.
Siphon, output. That's what it means. And then you follow that by mellitus, which is identifies it as a sugar issue.
That's the usual one that people get.
I've only seen a couple of cases of diabetes insipidus my whole career. I was in medical school. Yeah, and we're talking about a really common problem. We're talking about half the population of Western countries being pre-diabetic. In modern countries like the United States or China, or most of European countries, we're talking about 12 to 14% of the people are frankly diabetic. In other words, they hit the definition of diabetes, which is based upon your blood sugar, fasting blood sugar.
Okay, wait a minute. What does pre-diabetic mean?
Pre-diabetic means they're headed towards getting full-on
Well,
diabetes.
how do they know?
Let's see. What would they know? They have say, an elevated blood sugar between 90 and 126.
Okay.
Or what they do is they do a hemoglobin A1c, Mary, which is where you test the amount of glucoses attached to hemoglobin. And if you got a lot of glucose in your blood, sugar in your blood, then a lot of it attaches to your hemoglobin. So you get something called hemoglobin A1c, which is given as a percent value. In other words, how much is this particular protein?
But isn't that a reading over a long period of time?
That is over like months.
Okay.
Months. And there are some people who define prediabetes as, normal hemoglobin A1c is about, well, it could be 6.3, it could be 6. But they're pushing the level down. So I just heard somebody tell me that they had prediabetes with a hemoglobin A1c of 5.6. Now, why would they pushing it down? Why would they make the number that you become diabetic called diabetic? It helps the market. That's what it does.
Yeah.
When I started in medical school, it was over 50 years ago. Diabetes was defined as a blood sugar of 200. And then it became commonly a blood sugar of 160. Now it's 126. When we started talking about a good hemoglobin A1c level, it was around 6%, maybe 6.3%. And now they got it down to scaring people with a hemoglobin A1c of 5.6. And what does that mean? More doctor visits, more drugs.
They got to watch them to make sure or catch them just when they turn into real diabetics, right?
Well, no. There are doctors and drug companies that push treating pre-diabetes. Must go on a little metformin. We just catch it in the bud.
That's supposed to prevent it?
Well, they think so.
Okay.
It's complete nonsense. But what does the patient know? Oh, doc, you put me on these diabetic medications, but so I don't get it. Excuse me, these drugs are dangerous and they're useless. They really are. And you know that if you listen to the lecture that I gave you, just how dangerous and useless that they are. Metformin which is glucophage, may increase your risk of dying of heart disease, or it might decrease it, not sure. Your sulfonylureas for sure increase your risk of dying of heart disease by 2.5 times. We knew that in 1970. These new concoctions they have out should scare you to death. More amputations, more fungal infections. It's terrible. Okay, I wouldn't tell you this terrible story if I didn't have an answer for you. Well, first, let me tell you there are many things that are called diabetes mellitus. In other words, sweet, large output of urine. You have type 1 diabetes, which is caused by an autoimmune reaction to animal foods. It's been identified in 1992 from the New England Journal of Medicine as 17 amino acids that are on the beta casein part of the milk, cow's milk molecule. Okay, the body attacks this milk that gets into your bloodstream, and then it attacks the insulin-producing cells of the pancreas. They're called beta cells. And you destroy the pancreas over a short period of time, like 3 to 5 years. And we used to call that childhood diabetes, but half the people who have type 1 diabetes are over the age of 19 years. So this happens up to adulthood. And then we have type 2 diabetes, which is due to overnutrition. These people are just too plain fat. And what happens as a result of being overweight, I know, Heather, you don't like me to use the term.
I was going to say this.
I'm in trouble again. Listen.
They're overweight.
They're overweight, 30, 40, 50 pounds overweight. And what happens is when you get that big, the body says, hey, this is not healthy to be that big. And what it does is it develops insulin resistance. It means the insulin does not work at the cellular level. And as a result, the sugar goes up. It's just a normal metabolic adaptation. It's 100% curable with weight loss. And the best way to lose weight is with the diet that we teach you. 100% curable by surgery. Bariatric surgery, they have cure rates of 80 to 85%.
But nobody ever gets told that.
Well, it's in the literature. And bariatric
okay.
surgeons, they tell people that a lot.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, type 1 diabetes always has to be treated with insulin. We don't have any insulin pumps that'll take care of it. But we do. We have insulin pumps that deliver insulin. We don't have any fake pancreases. You got to be on insulin, period. But when we take care of people who have type 1 diabetes, I have to reduce the dose of insulin that they're taking by 1/3, sometimes 1/2. Otherwise, they get too low a blood sugar because the food we feed them makes the insulin work so much better. So a type 2 diabetic, however, what I'll do is I stop all their insulin. If I'm sure they're a type 2 diabetic, I stop all their pills. I've taken people off 140 units of insulin, 4 diabetic pills that are taken at a time, just plain because, I've been doing this for 50 years.
All right,
So
wait a minute. How can you tell if they're a real type 2 diabetic?
May I say they're too fat?
No.
Okay. Well, they usually are pretty darn big, and they have a history. They have a history of developing the diabetes later on in life, and they have not been diagnosed as type 1 diabetic because they've not gone into ketoacidosis.
Okay.
Ketoacidosis, they get real sick from their diabetes. They could die. They have to have insulin type 1. So anyways, it's a guess, Mary. It's based upon years of taking care of patients. I say, I think you're a type 2 diabetic, and I think you ought to reduce or stop the medication. Sometimes for the patient's benefit, I don't stop all the medication. They just met me. I know they're a little scared if I took them off all their medications. So, I'm sensitive to their feelings.
And their other doctor probably told them they had to take it forever.
For a lifetime. Once you're on these drugs, you're never going to get off these drugs, so don't even think about it. And what they do is they teach you in medical school, as you've heard Dr. Lim say, to manage diabetes. You manage high blood pressure. You manage heart disease. You never cure it. You just switch from one brand of drug to the next and just push you up as the time goes on, you go metformin, sulfonylureas, the new diabetic medications that have all kinds of adverse effects, and then you put on insulin. And you think, oh, you're just a terrible person. You get sicker and sicker. Well, the doctor never told you what causes it. All right, I told you what causes type 1 diabetes. It's this autoimmune reaction. And you've learned that if you've listened to the lecture. Type 2 diabetes, what happens is just been being overweight. How's that? Pretty nice? Overweight?
That's nice.
Okay. Chubby. Anyway, you are in trouble because what your body says is you're just getting too big for your survival. And so it develops insulin resistance. A type 2 diabetic will produce as much insulin and offers twice as much insulin as somebody without diabetes. They got loads of insulin around. It just doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because they're overweight. So as they lose weight, it'll work much better. The body-produced insulin, or even the drugs they give them, it'll work better just from losing the weight. Plus, when you change from a high-fat to a high-carbohydrate diet, fat paralyzes insulin activity. Okay? Carbohydrate, even pure white sugar, makes insulin work better. Now, this may sound strange to you. I challenge you. Give this to your best friend who's a doctor, or the doctor who's taking care of you, and say, look, Dr. McDougall says some things here. Tell me why he's wrong. I mean, I've studied this. I've studied work back to 1927 when Shirley Sweeney took care of his medical students and gave them a high sugar diet, licorice, candy, sugar, honey, high sugar diet. None of them tested diabetic. Then he fed them a high fat diet, bacon grease, olive oil, cheese, etc. You saw the experiment if you watched the lecture. Every one of the healthy medical students in 2 days developed diabetes. Yeah.
But when I was a kid, my parents had friends that would come over to visit us, and they would say they had sugar diabetes.
Well,
or they just say, I have sugar.
Yeah. Well, that's what they used to call diabetes mellitus.
Oh, sugar diabetes.
Yeah, sugar diabetes. Okay.
Yeah. Nobody ever told them that was due to the fat. They'd bring desserts that were made without sugar.
And people, I can't tell you how many people are taught that what you have to do for diabetes is to stay away from sugar. But that's just the opposite of what you need to know. One of my mentors, Nathan Pritikin, said, the American Diabetic Association diet is a diet that guarantees all diabetics will remain diabetic for a lifetime. The cure rate, again, for type 2 diabetes is 100%. Now, there's something in between. This runs a spectrum, something in between a type 2 where you make tons of insulin, okay, and type 1 where you don't make any insulin at all or not enough. And that's type 1.5 diabetes, I call it. That's partial pancreatic insufficiency. In that case, you make enough insulin to keep yourself out of the hospital, but not enough insulin to, say, prevent polyuria, excessive urination. That diabetes part we talked about, siphon, pass through, urinate all the time, every place. You don't produce enough insulin to stop the excessive urination, or as a result, you develop excess thirst. And the other thing that happens with a type 1.5 diabetic, and the reason I treat them, is they lose too much weight. So I give them a little shot of long-acting insulin to get rid of the thirst and to keep their weight on, because they'll lose so much weight that the friends just think they're sick, that they got AIDS or cancer, because they need some help. They don't make enough insulin to, anyway, I do prescribe Lantus. Long-acting insulin is called Lantus. Okay.
But never the pills.
I don't prescribe ever the pills. They're dangerous. They don't do any good, or at least not worth buying them for, especially at the prices they charge you today. But you're getting this crazy sales pitch from your doctors. I just can't believe, it's like you think politicians are dishonest. You should see what goes on in my business. Anyway, so there are a couple of things I want to get through too, and I
Okay, I'll be quiet.
No, of course.
You can get to your story.
All right. Well, I was going to tell you, Shirley Sweeney, he started out in 1927. He worked for a guy named Percival Hemsworth. And they were the fathers of diabetes in this country and Western Europe for forever. And Percival Hemsworth, he published in 1940 in the British Medical Journal the study that should have stopped all this nonsense. He took type 2 diabetics, he fed them a high-fat diet, their sugars went wild, really high. Fed them a high carbohydrate diet, low fat, sugars just went way down. That was 1940. And then we had Brunzell from University of Washington. 1972, he published in the New England Journal of Medicine where he took type 2 diabetics and he fed them a diet of 45% simple sugar. Maltose and dextrans is almost like table sugar. And then what he did is he doubled the sugar to 85% of the calories. This is just an experiment. Every aspect of their diabetes became better. Fasting blood sugars improved, their blood sugar levels improved, everything became better by doubling the sugar intake. And then let's see, we have an experiment done on type 1 diabetics where you feed them high-fat meals. They had to take more insulin. Yeah, type 1 diabetics. And type 2 diabetics, they're taking these fish fats, and that makes their diabetes worse. It's vegetable oil, fish fat, cow fat, pig fat, any kind of fat you want. It makes the insulin inefficient. Sugar makes the insulin. If what I tell you is true, then no diabetic would be getting better because they're taught the opposite. Do you know any diabetics that are getting better? Come on now. Do you ever see a diabetic get better? If you've been in our program,
Yes,
you do.
I do all the time.
We see a lot of diabetics get better.
We see almost every.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? One of the common emails that I get from people is that I'm diabetic. I've tried the starch diet and my blood sugars go up every time I eat.
Well, that's what happens when you eat is your sugar goes up. But what you want to do is you want to eventually cure the diabetes. I mean, if your goal is to make your sugar low, just eat meat. Then you'll have low blood sugar numbers. But that's not your goal. Your goal is to cure the insulin insensitivity. You want to be rid of this disease. So what happens is people they eat a lot of food, they eat a lot of calories, and the blood sugar goes up. How high? Maybe 150 or 100.
Isn't it supposed to go up after you eat?
Yeah, it always does in my body.
Oh, okay.
But what happens is as they wait, how long does it take? Well, in our patients, when we used to take care of them in the clinic, we watch them every day. And usually within 3 or 4 days, their blood sugars have gone back down to what they were or continue to improve. Remember, you got to lose the weight before you eventually can declare yourself a failure. Until you lose the weight, you can't declare yourself a failure because once you get down to trim body weight, if you follow this type of diet and you're truly a type 2, you are cured. You cured yourself of heart disease and constipation and a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, I just want to touch on one more thing. We could go through all the people who have treated diabetes with a healthy diet. Like we could go through Rabinovich's work, which started in 1939. We could do Nathan Pritikin's work in the 1970s. We could do James Anderson from University of Kentucky. He worked in the 1970s too. Anyway, all these people, David Jenkins from University of Toronto just published a paper. Neil Bernard just published a paper. There's this research going on that you don't get much attention to. Why? Because it doesn't sell you pills. So anyways, there's a whole list in that lecture about different doctors, including myself, who treat diabetes with a healthy diet. Now, the other problem you have to deal with, and I'm going to end here, Heather. The other problem you have to deal with is you have to deal with the complications. Diabetics, they have kidney failure, they become demented, they have heart attacks, they have gangrene. They're compromised people. They have a metabolic handicap, whether they're a type 1 or a type 2 diabetic. They can't defend and repair as well. So when you eat the American diet, you fall apart at a rampant rate. Switching to a healthy diet, it clears up diabetic retinopathy, which is exudates and hemorrhages in the eye. And by the way, it's not going on just in the eye. It's going on in the brain, in the kidneys, and the toes. Every place in the body. You can just see it easily in the eye. These things clear up when you go on a healthy diet. Walter Kempner taught that. So did Van Eck in the same period of time. These are pioneers. Nobody questions their research because it's true. What they do is they just don't tell you about it.
Yeah,
Once a diabetic.
Nobody except you talks about this research.
Well, it's because I have a passion for it.
I know.
Mary, I just don't like to manage patients. I don't like to.
I know you would much rather see them get cured.
Yeah, why should I give you a bunch of drugs and a bunch of excuses? I'd like to see you do well. That's why I became a doctor. I think that's why most doctors became doctors. They wanted to help people. But the drug companies are there to make billions of dollars. And so they educate the doctors You think doctors get an education any place also from the drug companies? The drug companies, they buy research articles, they go into their offices and pump this information to usually male doctors from the really sexy, young, scantily dressed. Okay. Anyway, that's what they do. I'm going too far, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You're a customer, you're getting bamboozled. It's not true, and you're suffering, and harm is being done to you, and it's costing you a ton of money. It costs $23,000 a year on average to treat a diabetic. Okay, well, the complications, your kidney failure is stopped with a healthy diet. Peripheral neuropathy. I showed you 2 studies in this lecture that showed that peripheral neuropathy, that's where you have burning pain in your legs, is stopped or reversed with a healthy diet. Never with drugs. There are no drugs that treat any of these complications. Anyway, that's my lecture on diabetes. You can watch the whole hour, and I assure you, if you show your favorite friend who thinks they know the subject, you ask them, why am I wrong? Have I misstated the science? In 50 years, nobody's ever come back to me and said that I made a mistake. But if I did, I'd be glad to correct it, because there's so much information that you should know about how to get well. Anyway, that's my speech. That's my monologue.
Well, lots of questions are coming in about diabetes and a whole slew of other topics. I'd like to get to a few from Errol. He's wondering what blood sugar is cause for concern.
Well, it depends upon who you're listening to. A blood sugar of 126 milligrams per deciliter is considered diabetic. So a normal blood sugar, let's just say an average blood sugar is about 100 milligrams per deciliter.
Well, this is a fasting blood sugar, right?
Yeah, it's in the morning fasting. If you look at somebody from rural Africa, their blood sugar may be 40, 50 milligrams per deciliter. When do I get concerned? Almost never, if it's a type 2 diabetic. My goal is to get people well. It's not to treat numbers. So there is no number where you say, oh my God, it's 200 or 250. I better run to the emergency room. It just doesn't exist that way. So I'm confident. I know what I'm doing is right. But, again, I'm a doctor. I've been at this for 50 years. I've taken care of 12,000 people, and at least 15% have been diabetics.
Well, you've had a lot of experience with this. So
Yeah.
for other people, it might not come quite so easily.
And this is why it's hard for other doctors to practice this way. Well, I'll tell you the reason it's hard. It's hard to make money.
Yeah.
So it just comes down to money, folks. Don't think
But it feels really good helping people. And I know everyone is very thankful for the time that they're able to spend with you and ask all of these questions. And so another question came in about, you mentioned that you wouldn't experience benefits sometimes until the weight was lost. Is that true with diabetics?
Well, yes, because you have the insulin resistance that's caused by being overweight. So losing weight makes the insulin work more efficiently. And that's why bariatric surgery, when they take and rearrange the anatomy of the stomach, they put sleeves in, or they add expansion balls to the stomach, or they cut part of your intestine out. They don't change the diet. They feed you the typical Western diet. And these are the people where I say that, the published research in the New England Journal of Medicine shows a cure rate of 78 to 87%. Cured.
But they don't stay that way.
Well, if they go back to eating, they don't.
Yeah.
If they gain the weight, yeah. And what a thing to go through to lose the weight, when all you got to do is switch to a traditional diet.
But the people that come to our program,
Yeah.
they get better right away, even if they haven't lost weight.
Oh yeah, because you have the factor of not feeding the fat, which paralyzes the insulin, and remember Brunzell's study, feeding the carbohydrate, which makes insulin work more efficiently. Okay. And when you stop the medication, the medications that produce insulin drives fat into fat cells. Okay, so if you take shots of insulin, or your pancreas produces too much insulin, you take drugs that force the pancreas to produce too much insulin, you get fatter. The average weight gain in a year is 18 to 20 pounds once you're started on medication. then you get fatter, which means you get sicker, you're more diabetic, you need more medication. It's a vicious cycle. You are guaranteed, if you get typical treatment for diabetes, now we're talking about type 2 and type 1.5, you will remain diabetic, you will suffer the complications, you'll suffer complications from the medications, you will never get well. If that's good enough for you, and there are a lot of people out here who say, just as long as I have my bacon and eggs, doc, I don't care how many pills I got to take. Well, if that's the kind of person you are, fine. There are lots of doctors out there that will treat you. If you're the kind of person that says, look, I want to look good, I want to feel good, I want to live long, I don't want to take all these drugs. Sick people take drugs. I want off of them. Then we can help you. And we're one of the few places that does it. Neil Bernard does it up in the Northeast, and there's still some remnants of the Pritikin program. I can't really recommend it because it's changed a lot. There used to be more programs that took this approach back 30, 40, 50 years ago. But the power of the pharmaceutical industries is just over on everybody with the information. I'll sit and watch cable news network, and I'll see 4, 5, 6 ads in an hour for diabetic medications. Why do you think they can afford to do this? It's just, this is money. Anyway, they don't come on and say you need to eat potatoes to cure your diabetes. Oh, and you should take my drug. They used to be forced to say diet and diabinase, which is one of the drugs they used. That was part of the diet and diabinase. Why? Because that gave them some penance for pushing the drugs. They said, well, I told you diet first. But they don't even bother with that anymore. They just push you right onto the drugs. Anyway, you're being hurt. It's not true. I challenge anybody to show me that I'm wrong. Not because I want to fight, just because it's the things I'm saying.
Because you don't want anybody to get hurt.
Well, and just the things I'm saying to these people, Mary, they must go, God, this is so radical. Why is my own doctor talking about this? It's because you believe doctors are next to God, and they should be treated as you would a used car salesman. That's the way they should be treated. They're just people. They got to pay for the tuition for the kids. They got to pay payments on their Tesla. They're driven just like all of us are by the buck. So,
we should definitely ask questions of our doctors and ask for the research. Show me the research that shows what you're recommending to me is going to do me more good than harm. I always hear you say that, Dad.
Well, and the problem is that they usually can't.
Well, they never can.
Yeah.
Now when we get down to the science, and that's where I work at, is the level of science. And I give you all the science. I provide all the references right there for you. So you can look up the studies. You have the internet. You can look it up. And you can challenge your doctor if you want to take the trouble, but I know you're afraid of your doctor. You're afraid because the doctor's going to remember when you ask him a tough question, and when you get really sick, the doctor won't give you the drug that saves your life because he thinks you're just a pain. Hey, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Go ask questions. The best way to get the right answers from your doctor is take your attorney to the office. Say, Doc, do I really need to have this heart surgery? Here are the research papers that say heart surgery for chronic coronary artery disease does not save lives. And you're pushing this operation on me. And my attorney is going to go after you if you can't support it. You want to see a doctor squirm? I've done this my whole career. I've gone in with patients into a doctor's office and sat there and told the doctor, now you tell me what you just told my patient. Story changes. Anyway, the science is the science. The truth's the truth. I've given you the science. Anyway, go on, Heather.
Okay, well, it's 5:30, so I'd like to move on to some general questions.
Right.
Lots are coming in. So let's see. John is writing in, and he's a bit frustrated because he says he's been following the starch solution, and he's gained 40 pounds.
Well, he's going out to eat. Or he's adding a little bit of this and a little bit of that. This plain and simple never happens. And I have to tell, I don't, can I be rude?
No.
I can't be rude. Can I be just a little rude?
Heather and I agree. You can't be rude.
What
I
happens?
think there's just little tweaks that people need to make, like sometimes too many nuts and seeds or avocado or bread, and all those things add up, and we just don't think about those.
Well, sometimes people don't tell the truth to themselves, much less to other people. That's a problem. That's pretty nice. Too.
Yeah, that's
not bad,
true.
not bad. One of my mentors, Walter Kemper, used to put it another way, which I won't say on air, but he was a lot blunter than I am.
Well, you know what? There are so many things that I've heard too. You know, people that are fixing dinner for someone else, they'll just have a little taste here and there, and that doesn't really count as any food being eaten because they weren't sitting down at the table.
I think Hershey candy bars with almonds were not part of the diet. It's high carbohydrate. I'll tell you why you can believe it never happens. If you're as old as Mary and I are, you remember the time when Asians were always trim. Okay, before 1980, there were no overweight Chinese. There were no type 2 diabetics in China before 1980. 90% of their diet was rice. I was on the periphery of the Vietnamese conflict. And we used to watch newsreels of the Vietnamese in the town squares. And there were 100,000 people standing around. You could still see that in North Korea.
They're all thin.
They're all thin. How come it is? And
but didn't you tell me a story too about one of your mentors went to China and they couldn't find any diabetics?
Well, it was multiple sclerosis patients.
Oh, multiple sclerosis. Okay.
That was Roy Swank. He went there and they could find 5 people with MS in all of China. And he said they didn't have multiple sclerosis. Yeah, the diseases of Western living. You can see, if you're old enough or you're a historian, you could see it. So if this person is gaining weight, he defies the laws of thermodynamics. But you know what I found, Heather, is if I sit down and I question them, and we really go through the details, then they realize that, they're not doing things as we recommend. Okay, go on.
Well, we've had people come to the program, Heather, that we've had people come to the program and they've said, I can't do this. I'm just not getting the results I want. And after
I do it strictly. I'd follow your diet absolutely strictly.
And after they spend 12 days with us, they go home and they say, well, I really learned a lot of things.
Mary, they go home after losing 5, 6, 7 pounds.
I know, but they also say they learned a lot.
The program sorts out the details.
Yeah.
And plus, if you want to force weight loss, we have a couple of programs that make weight loss more efficient. One is to simplify the diet. It's called Mary's Mini Diet. And it basically, you pick one starch and a couple of different green and yellow vegetables. You just eat the same thing over and over again, very monotonous. People lose weight faster that way. The other is the maximum weight loss program, where of course you don't eat any nuts and seeds and avocados and vegetable oils. But what you do is you increase the amount of green and yellow vegetables. And on the basic McDougall program, 10% of the diet is green and yellow vegetables and fruits. 90% is starch, like potatoes, beans, rice, corn, pasta, 90%. Now, what we do, because green and yellow vegetables we limit the fruits because the fruits they're high calorie and they're so tasty. we increase the amount of green and yellow vegetable to say 25%, and that's the maximum weight loss program. And then if you want to really get aggressive, you go 50%. But if you go further than 50%, I call it hasty. You're not going to be able to stick to it because you're just eating all day long. It's like you're a gorilla sitting around. You have to eat all day long to get enough calories. If I'm going to get enough calories from cabbage, I got to eat 11 to 22 pounds of cabbage, depending on how active I am that day. Anyway, the reason I say you're defying the laws of thermodynamics, calories in versus calories out, is if you add up everything that you've eaten in a day and you're gaining weight, then you need to be reported to medical science if you're following our diet. It just never happens.
Thank you.
Anyway, I hate to be so rude. Sorry about that.
No, I think, it's sometimes people just need to look at what they're eating and maybe make a few changes. And I've also heard you tell people to eat smaller, more frequent meals throughout the day rather than 3 large meals.
And stop eating out. They're always sneaking fat in your food. And I see that as one of the biggest problems. And, throw the vegetable oils out. They're a health hazard. But I can't tell you how many times, it's kind of my personality, Heather, and you sit on visits when I see people that come to the 12-day program. When people need a little bit extra care, Dr. Lim and I share their care. And you'll sit there and, I'll just tell them, because of my personality. I'll just tell them, look, this is the way it is. Think about it. And they get mad at me sometimes. They think that I'm being too abrupt with them. I should be nicer. I just want you to get well. I'm not here to win a popularity contest. I just want to help you get well. I let Dr. Lim deal with the personality thing because he's such a nice guy, and the rest of the crew also is nice. Don't expect me to stand around and pump you up. I'm not going to do it.
I'm back.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you exactly what the trouble is, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to get well. And I can tell you the number of people who have come back to me and said, "Thank you, doc. I really needed that conversation. I needed that talk." I think about this one guy, Howard, we took care of, who was a diabetic, a while back. And he was on a whole bunch of pills on fish fat and all kinds of things. And I said, look, stop all the pills. We'll start you on a little Lantus. He said, I feel so horrible. I can't stand. I can't make it through the day. And within 3 days, he came back. He says, I haven't felt this good in 20 years. And he thanked me. But boy, I'll tell you, our conversation went pretty tough.
First, he said you made him mad, and then he thanked you.
Yeah, he's bold about it. I guess we've become friends in the sense that he said, you really made me mad the first visit or two we had together.
You're probably good at that.
I'm not here to win a popularity contest. Yeah. Fortunately.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, next question. Let's see. White text keeps writing in about gynecomastia.
Gynecomastia, that's breast enlargement.
Yes.
And of course, we're talking about males. Gynecomastia is, you see it a lot in the males today when they wear t-shirts because they're too fat. And so they lay down fat tissue in their breast area. And some of them look like they can wear bras. But there are other conditions that cause gynecomastia. There are medications like spironolactone, aldactone, that will cause gynecomastia. You can run into liver problems that would cause it. If you took estrogens, we are in a society where people are changing their sexual identity. And part of that is taking different hormones from the opposite sex. And so you grow breasts and, or your breasts become involuted if you're a female to male, so drugs will do it. But otherwise, it's just what you see out there in the street is a bunch of men and boys who are just plain and simple.
Too large.
Too large, thank you. Underly slim, how about that?
Oh, there you go.
Underly slim.
No.
But if you actually have a condition, are there things that you can do?
Well, you can stop the spironolactone. That's one thing. There are some other hormone problems.
What do you take spironolactone
for? For high blood pressure. It used to be a drug for high blood pressure.
Okay.
Now it's given for people who have heart failure. But there are other metabolic conditions that are just really, really rare, and I can't think of them off the top of my head right now. We're talking about 1 in 20,000 people that would cause that. I walk down the street, and I'm going to walk down the street a little later on to get my exercise today. I bet I see 4 or 5 young boys and men who have gynecomastia. Minimum.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's see, lots of other questions coming in. I'm being told, this is from Tony, that gluten is bad because it hinders the absorption of nutrients.
Well, gluten, there are a number of people in Western societies who don't handle wheat, barley, and rye well. Now I say this in modern Western societies, it's about at a rate of about 1 out of 250 to 1 out of 100 people. I'm being generous to say 1 out of 100 people has celiac disease. This is an intestinal problem. You get malabsorption. That's what they're talking about, nutrients. You don't absorb nutrients. You could often have diarrhea and cramps, and weight loss. And what happens is your bowel is damaged by wheat, barley, and rye. But I have to believe this is just a modern phenomenon, because there have been societies of people who've lived on wheat, barley, and rye. And these would be people who would be naturally selected out of the gene pool. Anyway, there's another condition called dermatitis herpetiformis, which is a skin condition, which you also develop if you're sensitive to wheat, barley, and rye. So I think it's my September 2009 newsletter. Yeah, it's a discussion on celiac disease. Anyway, there are lots of starches you can eat that don't have wheat, barley, and rye with them. For example, potatoes or sweet potatoes or corn or rice. So a person with celiac disease will do just fine. They'll cure the problem. In fact, the way you diagnose the problem and you cure the problem is you change the diet. The other way that you have a good idea whether or not they have celiac disease is we do a couple of blood tests, which kind of indicate you may have celiac disease, or you get a biopsy done of your bowel, which shows that the bowel has been damaged. But the real true diagnosis is you give up wheat, barley, and rye, you get better. Then you start taking it again, you get sick.
How long does it take?
About a month.
A month, okay.
Yeah. And poor people who have celiac disease, we truly have celiac disease, and they hear everybody say, oh, I'm gluten sensitive. Oh, I got celiac disease. And, I can't have wheat, barley, and rye. Like 40% of the foods sold in the grocery store have a label gluten-free. And this person is trying to live in a gluten-free environment, goes to a restaurant, says, I got celiac disease and I want pea soup, but I don't want any croutons. And the waiter comes out with pea soup and croutons and a big loaf of bread. And the guy says, look, I told you I had celiac disease. Well, the last 39 people walked in here, they told me that too, and they just ate up the bread and the gluten and the croutons.
So
Anyway,
it does affect some people, but
the only cure, there's no drug for celiac disease is to get off the wheat, barley, and rye. That's it. You're stuck with. That's why it doesn't get a lot of notoriety, except in the grocery stores. Is there's no drug to sell you to get you off of the. You got to fix the food. Where's the profit there?
Unfortunately.
thank you. Next question from Mango Marie. I have mixed connective tissue disease. Can the starch diet help reverse this illness or stop it from progressing?
Well, that's just another term for autoimmune diseases. What happens, the body attacks connective tissue, which will be your joints, your tendons, your ligaments. It's just an autoimmune disease. And why does the body attack itself? It's because you're eating foods that are similar to self. What is self? Self is an animal. You are an animal. When you eat animal parts or animal secretions, what happens is sometimes these animal parts and secretions, they go in the bloodstream and the body says, hey, there's something foreign here, like a virus or a bacteria. I got to attack it. And it ends up a process called molecular mimicry. You can look it up. Or you can also watch my lecture on autoimmune diseases. And that one, again, is a great lecture on YouTube. What happens is the body, when it's looking for, say, cow milk protein, or looking for pig thyroid, or looking for connective tissue, you do eat connective tissue when you eat animal slices of muscle, don't you? I know you do.
Well, we don't like to think about that.
We don't like to think. We cover it up with sauce and close our eyes and eat it. Anyway, that's what happens is in the way you cure it. And by the way, people who have celiac disease have a higher incidence of autoimmune diseases because you destroyed the barrier of the bowel. And so a lot more easily, the animal foods, the milk and the muscle and the thyroid, the hair follicles, all these things get in more easily when you have celiac disease. So celiac patients have much more autoimmune disease. Is it curable? Yeah, it is. What do you have to do? Well, you start by getting all the animal foods out of your diet. And the second thing you do is you follow a gluten-free diet to make sure that you don't have any of these bowel problems. Remember, the only test and treatment, definitive test and treatment, is the food. You've got to change the diet. And then you do something called the elimination diet, which is talked about in my May 2014 newsletter towards the end.
Thank you. Next question from Candace. How does bariatric surgery impact this diet? What do you recommend if you've had it?
Well, what you're told is that you've got to be on all kinds of supplements. So the patient goes home on a bag full of vitamins and minerals and supplements. And, they're never well after they have this kind of surgery because, like, for example, if they put a balloon in or they do a sleeve, they make the stomach essentially smaller. And that way they force you to be hungry all the time. But you're smart, so you know how to get around it. So what you do is you grind up your food so it gets around the balloons or through the sleeve faster. And so you don't lose weight. Anyway, they send you home. And then if you dare say, And by the way, if you look up Mike Wilson in our star McDougall's, you'll see a guy that went from 450 pounds to 150 pounds. He had bariatric surgery. He didn't lose any weight. He had bypass surgery, intestinal bypass surgery, Mike Wilson. But then he went on our diet and he lost every bit of it and kept it off. As far as I know, that was like 40 years ago and he still has it off. But anyway, they'll tell you, and then you tell them, oh, I'm going on a vegan vegetarian diet. They go, oh no, that's deficient. What's it deficient in? It's deficient in calcium and protein. Well, have there ever been any cases of calcium or protein deficiency? No. There never have been. Well, what are you worried about then? And you end up going on the diet that is most dense in nutrients, vitamin C, beta carotene, a safe form of vitamin E, folic acid. That's in plants. So I have these people to stop their vitamin pills. It's just a waste of money. Plus, it causes problems. In fact, you can watch on YouTube the lecture I just recently gave on vitamins. Look, you guys, you got to do some of your homework yourself. We're going to help you get through this. You attend the 12-day program, you're going to have a whole bunch of people who are there to support you, not just with education, but you're going to have somebody get up with you in the morning, talk to you about your blood sugar, your blood pressure, talk to you about what you're going to eat during the day, any problems you expect to have with your spouse or your coworkers. You know, that's our support staff every day. And how long does that last? Well, you know, it lasts every week until that's the whole 12 days, then every week for a while, and then a whole year. We'll give you a year's worth of support. And you get the finest medical care out there. Medical care dedicated to getting you off drugs, unnecessary medication, and to getting you well, to return your lost appearance, okay, and the health you used to have. Remember when you were younger, remember how good it felt? Now it doesn't feel so good anymore. You're getting older, but getting older should be just passing from decade to decade to decade. It's not deteriorating at a rapid rate like it's happening with almost everybody. So anyway, you got a chance to get back on track. We're happy to help you. Besides that, who's going to take them off their medication? Doctors are scared to death to do that. Why? Because the drug companies and the legal system has taught them to be afraid. So you're not going to get any doctor to take you off the drugs, folks. You know, but we are dedicated to getting you off the medication. We have no problem. No problem. I've been doing this for 46 years. I've got one complaint against me in 46 years. That's it. That was when I criticized Robert Atkins in a national media campaign because he died obese. Remember Robert Atkins? Died obese, had heart disease, high blood pressure, sick guy. I talked about it in the New York Times. I talked about it on various cable shows, including Neil Cavuto. I was on his show. Anyway, his wife, behind my back, went to give me some trouble. I didn't find out about it for a while. And then, anyway, I wanted to make it a public event. But that's the complaint I've gotten in 46 years of practice in this way. Why? Because I think I'm a good communicator with people. And I think they trust what I have to say. And besides that, where you get into trouble is by doing things.
Well, you try to take care of the whole person instead of just handing them some pills.
Well, I hand out pills. I got a prescription pad. Don't let her kid you. I got a prescription pad. I prescribe thyroid supplementation. I prescribe blood pressure pills if your blood pressure is really high. I prescribe Lantus insulin. Remember I told you that? Well,
but these are pretty rare.
Well, I would say our data, published data, shows that we get 90% of our attendees. This is 1,703 people we're looking at. Nobody's excluded. We get nearly 90% of the people off their medications or they reduce their medications, particularly diabetic and high blood pressure medications. That's what we have published. That's been published since 2004. That's 8 years. Nobody has questioned this scientific data. Maybe they're not interested. Maybe they're too busy pushing drugs. I don't know.
It's just getting people to do it.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess I have a theme tonight, Heather. I'm kind of mad. I tell you, one of my patients was just recently mistreated, and you know who it is. And yeah. I'm very upset. I had a big talk with her doctor, and They're just horrible the way they were treated. They're just treated like dirt. I feel like going to the hospital he works at and reporting him to the hospital medical board because what he did was wrong. Anyway, I guess I'm upset about that. That's been going on for the last 3 days.
Well, they're so lucky that you have their back. Let's see, we've got a little bit more time. Another question. This is from Robert, and this is about skin cancer and what you recommend if you have a spot of squamous cell cancer on your face. What would you recommend?
Well, I used to recommend a drug called Picato, Picato, but no, because that results in basal cell and squamous cell carcinoma. It's been taken off the market. So you're not going to be able to get that drug. It's something I know a lot about because I used to live in Hawaii, and I moved my body that was intended to be at 44 degrees latitude down to 22 degrees latitude, and I had a sailboat, and I windsurfed all the time, and I got burnt pretty bad. So I'm an expert on this. What you can use is you can use Voltaren, which is an over-the-counter gel. You buy it, it's an arthritic drug. It's approved by the FDA to treat actinic keratosis. Very effective. You can use Aldera, and I use a lot of Aldera in my patients. It's a 5% cream, Aldara. I think I said it was the May 2003 newsletter, but it's really the May 2005 newsletter. I got corrected. Aldera is an extremely effective way of doing it. And I can't tell you the number of people I've helped avoid deformity.
Well, you have to warn them though. Warn them about what happens when you use Aldera.
Yeah, what happens is your skin breaks out like you got poison oak, and that's Aldera works by it causes your killer cells to attack abnormal cells. It doesn't attack any normal cells. It's been used for 40 years at least. It used to be used to treat venereal disease, virus infections in girls, because it would cause the immune system to attack the virus in the vaginal area. And they found out that it was really good for attacking abnormal cells. So Aldera, imiquidone is the formal name of it. Aldera, 5% cream, is approved by the FDA to treat actinic keratosis, basal cell, and squamous cell carcinoma. And there's evidence that it might be worthwhile to treat melanoma, which is the more serious, deadly cancer. I'm not going so far to tell you that's true, but I think that it should be explored. It is being explored in various studies. Extremely good treatment. You know, when they used to sell it for $200 a box of 12. And then they found out how good it works, and the drug companies raised it to $1,000 a box. And then it went generic. And now you can get it somewhere between $16 and $50 a box of 12. That's the way the business works, folks.
But can you get a dermatologist to prescribe this for you, or?
Well, you know, you go to the dermatologist, what they say is, "Oh, you don't want to do that. That just kind of burns and gets all red and everything." Well, what are you going to end up doing? Cut part of my nose off, you know? But they make their money doing liquid nitrogen treatments, Mohs surgeries. That's how they make their money. They're going to discourage you from doing it. So you'd have to ask your general doctor, because very few dermatologists, they're in the business. Very few dermatologists are going to recommend that for you, but they should. And when I say very few, you know, Heather, I know there are exceptions out there. You're right to say I generalize, but I'm talking about 95.5% of the medical community. So, you know, you want to, I just had a good friend, you know, in the television business, develop actinic keratosis. I was just looked at him. We were doing a little communication on, you know, you take a picture, you send it to your phone. I go, "Hey, you got terrible, terrible skin damage." So I gave him Aldera as a prescription, and he used it, and he broke out, but then it all cleared up, all went away. And I said, and he says, "Well, that really worked good." He says, "I have a basal cell carcinoma on the back of my neck." I said, "Look, wait a minute." I said, "Wait a minute. Let me send you the article on treating basal cell carcinoma." And I sent it right away. He says, "You know, I'm reading the article right now, and I'm laying down in the dermatologist's office, getting a hole cut in the back of my neck." He said, "I wish I'd known this 5 minutes before."
He should have asked you 5 minutes before.
You know, he didn't think, you know, just because I prescribed it for him for actinic keratosis, he didn't know what treat basal cell. He's been seeing the dermatologist every few months for years. And of course, been cut a little bit out here, biopsy that, on and on and on. I bet he never goes back to a dermatologist.
So that's a warning for people to ask questions about what they're going to have done and see if there's not a treatment like that.
Well, or you could use the internet, research it, look it up yourself. This is an open world. The information is available, and it's not controversial. It's not confusing. You might have to put a little extra work into it. And, I would start with the things that Mary and I have written. We've been at this for a long time, and see where we stand. And then what you do is you learn how I feel about things like, for example, diabetes. You go to your doctor and say, look, this is what Dr. McDougall recommends. And the first thing you're going to ask is, tell me why he's wrong. No, he's wrong. He's a health food nut. Why? Tell me why he's wrong. And then you ask the next question. You say, Doc, why shouldn't I try this first? If it doesn't work, I'll come to you and I'll get the managed care. Or I'll get the cancer cut out. I'll get a mastectomy. I'll get my colon cut out. Dr. McDougall says you just need a lumpectomy. You just need, anyway, you guys, we have a lot. That's why we're going to get together every Sunday night at 5 o'clock.
To get into.
There's lots of things we can talk about.
And so many questions coming in. We've just got a few minutes. Do you think we have time to get into osteopenia and just bone loss as we age as women?
Yeah, osteopenia is just by definition, it's supposed to be pre-osteoporosis, and likely it is. It's the bones start to get a little bit thin, but it hasn't gotten to the point where you're starting to have fractures yet, which is osteoporosis. Osteopenia occurs naturally because a woman passes from her reproductive years to her menopausal years, from a time when she's supposed to store minerals for the baby's growth, and to feed the baby. You store an extra 2 pounds of minerals in your bones. And when you had a bone mineral density test done, where they shoot photons into your bones, what you find out is that when you're in your reproductive years, your bones are very thick. And then what happens to you is you get to be at menopause, and the body says, why should I carry this extra 2 pounds of minerals around? So you shed the minerals. And as a result, you do this photon test, and you don't see as many minerals. But the bone could be just as strong. That's the important thing. How often does this occur? Well, in women over the age of 60, about 70% of them flunk the bone mineral density test. Just go to the website, look under hot topics, osteoporosis. The first article tells you that, it tells you this data. So it's a normal evolution in the female lifespan. You go from a woman who needs this extra mineral to a burden where to carry this mineral around makes no sense at all. That's why you flunk the test. But there is true.
We're made to feel like there's something wrong with us. Right?
Women, maybe I'll give the lecture, why God hates women. He does that, but I get into trouble every time I do that. So I'm not going to do it. It is a sad thing. I would encourage every one of you to be a good consumer and go out there, and somebody recommends something, just almost never as an emergency, say, I've got to leave, doc. I'm sure you're right. I got to leave, and I got to get some other opinions. I got to research this a little bit. You do this for an automobile. You do this when you buy a refrigerator. Won't you do it for your spouse or yourself or your children? These people are in business. These are men and women who are in business to make money. And, hopefully they do some good, but, that's why I went into medicine, as almost every other doctor did. But unfortunately, the bills get to be a problem. And, the patients never listen to you anyways. You tell them to change their diet, they never listen. So I'll just push I can get them out of the office in 7 minutes.
No, I think you inspired people to do their research and ask questions. And I think that's one of the important things about these Sunday nights, that we'll really get into the research and encourage people to ask questions. Don't just take what the doctor's saying.
Should we pick a topic for next time?
Sure. Do you have one in mind?
Well, I just, I was going to do popular things to start out with. I thought diabetes is a good thing to start out. What if we do obesity?
Sure.
Everybody's got a friend who's
overweight.
Oh, thank you. Overweight. Everybody's got a friend who's overweight. Why don't you take the trouble to watch the obesity lecture? And Heather will put that in the someplace. watch the obesity lecture. It's only an hour and 10 minutes. And I'll start out with a monologue on obesity. People who eat a traditional diet never are overweight. The Aztecs and the Mayans living on corn were never overweight. The Asians living on rice were never overweight.
You can tell them that next week.
I'll give you the monologue next time. Next week, 5 o'clock.
That was great. Thanks, Dr. McDougall and Mary, Mom and Dad.
Okay.
You got to tell me one more thing, Heather.
Yes.
Are you running a program next month?
August 19th, our next 12-day course.
All right.
You can sign up on our website, which is drmcdougall.com.
Get control. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. McDougall and Mary. See you all next Sunday.